Alright, so this is a video I've kind of wanted to make for a while, and I just didn't have the motivation to do it for, I don't know, years. I've wanted to make this video for years, until recently. So, real quick, I'm just going to give some background information before I get into what I want to talk about. Hopefully, I don't need to explain the Backrooms to you, as Kane Pixel's Backrooms movie is finishing up and trailers dropping and all that stuff. But to explain it as best I can, the Backrooms originally was a small 4chan green text post that detailed a place outside of our reality that you could accidentally end up in that's kind of implied to be devoid of life, sort of. It's really complicated, as the text sort of implies that could not be the case with the line, God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you. But that's besides the point. From this green text post eventually spawned the Backrooms Fandom wiki, which is basically a public writing forum or community that uses the green text post as a jumping off point to basically form an entire universe of interconnected written works by tons of people. If you know what the SCP is, or what SCP itself is, it functions essentially like that and that website, but just focused on a different premise. Sometime after the wiki's creation, people would divert from the wiki and create their own different wiki, still focused on the Backrooms concept and its premise, but with different rules and regulations, and on a different wiki hosting website, which it just simply goes by the name of the Backrooms wiki.wiki. Backrooms wiki.wiki. Now, as per the title of the video, where and what do you want to write? For where you want to write, you have several options. Fandom and Wikidot are basically the primary choices, but there's also the free writing Fandom Wiki, the Liminal Archives Wiki, and there's several other extremely niche writing wikis, technically not about the Backrooms, but still focus on a different reality like the Backrooms that are under different names. The only one that I actually partially know about is the Schoolrooms Wiki. For this video, and possibly any future videos I make, I'm going to focus on the Fandom Wiki, or Fandom Wikis, as in the Fandom Wiki and the free writing Fandom Wiki, because that's where all of my experience is, as I haven't written for Wikidot or the Liminal Archives Wiki or any other wiki besides the main fandom one. But I'll still try to bring up other wikis when I can. Just know I may be wrong when it comes to stuff relating to other wikis, so let's keep that in mind. To start, how serious do you want to take your writing? And or how well are you at writing? Fandom is among the more lax wikis in terms of rules and quality, mostly meaning compared to the wiki.wiki, there's more stuff that could be considered worse or lower in quality, but there's still high quality stuff as well. There's something to take into consideration is that rules and standards change between all wikis, although fandom standards don't change very often. With fandom, while it's recommended you get critique or feedback for your page from a moderator before uploading it, you technically don't have to, and the page can stay up as long as it just meets the quality standards. Which overall just means fandom is good for if you want to try your hand at writing with some rules and maybe write every once in a while, but not make it a full-time hobby, while still keeping up every once in a while as like a side interest, I guess. Your pages will, they'll likely stay up for a while due to rules not changing very often. Fandom is also a little bit more focused on world building as compared to Wikidot, which is focused on something else. Wikidot is much more strict, as they function under a green lighting system for uploading pages, meaning they have staff members dedicated to reviewing and checking over your page for any mistakes, and overall just giving tons of feedback. And if enough of them approve of what you've written, then you can have your page uploaded. But hopefully that comes without saying that in general, it will take a lot longer to get your page uploaded. Wikidot also, just in general, has more strict writing rules as well, but that in turn makes it so many of the pages on Wikidot can be considered higher quality than fandom pages to some people. Which also, quick tangent, is also why some people like to say Wikidot is more reliable, trustworthy, or canon than the fandom wiki. When they're separated, there's no and it's also creative writing, so there's no such thing as either one being more canon or more quote unquote like reliable because creative writing. Anyways, ugh. Wikidot also focuses more on exploration of the backrooms itself and entities that are within it, rather than fandom's focus on world building. Both Fandom and Wikidot have tons of guides for what to write and how to write in general for them, but I'm not going to focus on that in this short little video. I may focus on those. I may focus on the guides and how to write on another video, a different time for Fandom specifically. Oh, and there's also the free writing Fandom wiki, which is basically the Fandom wiki but with little to no rules whatsoever. Mostly functions as a wiki for people to do whatever they want, or people who aren't very good at writing in general and couldn't really cut it for the Fandom wiki. I'd mostly recommend the free writing wiki if you just want to get used to how the site, as in Fandom, works, and how it's formatted and how editors work, and or if you just want to make whatever your heart desires, I guess. Next is, what do you want your audience to be? Or what do you want your demographic to be? Free-writing mostly consists of very young and immature teenagers and or kids, and due to lack of rules, it isn't very serious. Anything you make there usually won't be taken seriously, and you won't ever really get feedback because most of it's never serious. No one's, again, not serious means no feedback. Fandom, the main Fandom wiki consists of teens, as the wiki is 13 plus, and technically free writing is, but some people lie about their age. Although, obviously, with the main wiki, it's more towards the side of nerdy teenagers, and a lot more people who are like 15 or older, rather than free writing, which usually has the opposite, where it's people under 15. You will get good feedback and critique with stuff that you write. There'll also still be some times where people will choke or half choke in the comments under your page instead of giving you feedback. Wikidot also primarily consists of adults, as the wiki is currently 17 plus. Although in the past it went from 15 to 16 to 17, meaning at some point it probably is just going to become 18 plus. So it's just technically all adults, but anyways, since the wiki has more strict rules and a more mature community, you will get a lot more feedback and a lot more critique, especially in the comments of your page, and or if you ask for it. Also, something to consider is just the general community rules of the wiki, if that's something you want to engage with, which you usually will want to if you want help. Free writing doesn't really have much of a community. They don't have a Discord to my knowledge, so there's no point to really mention them here, nor do I think if anyone watching this video would want to interact with those kind of people. The other free, though, I think I like to compare them as a spectrum of how lax they are in terms of their community rules. Wikidot is on the one end of the spectrum, as they're very strict, but everyone in the community is, from what I've seen, usually pretty nice. Although, I mean in the nicest way possible, that they are a little corny sometimes. But that sort of comes with everyone there being like, usually being 19 or older. But still, they still talk, they still play stuff together, like games, you know what I mean? The only thing that turns people away from Wikidot in terms of community rules is that you can't jokingly swear or just in general swear, or jokingly make fun of or insult people, even if you're cool with them, and just that sort of stuff. Meanwhile, fandom is basically in the middle of the spectrum. There's other stuff you can't say, and there's stuff you can't say, and you can't get away with saying certain weird stuff. They are a bit more open to being rude, just in general, or joking with random people or people you know with. And in fact, I'd say people usually care more about if you're just annoying rather than you're actually like technically breaking rules. Although it's like this, it's kind of described that being annoying would technically count as breaking the rule of common sense. And also, around 2022 up until late 2024, you could basically get away with just saying the R slur. And only recently, as in less than a month ago, was the R slur actually completely banned due to a certain staff member using it too much. And even though all stuff like that is banned, you may still see people and staff members joking about stuff like supporting Israel and I mean stuff like that. But usually, and from what I've seen both from asking and them generally saying, is that it's always done ironically. So if you don't like people joking about that kind of stuff, then it's probably better you do wiki. And then there's the opposite end of the spectrum from Wikidot, which is liminal archives, which I've not seen anyone. I'm probably the first person to majorly bring up liminal archives on YouTube for years, as I'm pretty sure their community has partially died out. But I know back in my day, back in the days, they were more of a gated community and or friend group rather than a writing wiki. But they still had their own website and wrote that's in under Wikidot. But as far as I'm aware, back then, anything went in their Discord server slur wise. So just making that what you will. Now, with all of that out of the way, what do you want to write? Both Fandom and Wikidot have different types of pages that focus on certain things about or in the backrooms itself, which have different rules or formats to follow. The main type of page, and the most common, what I personally think are the easiest types of pages to write, are level pages, which are essentially segments of the backrooms itself. Most level pages consist of describing and writing a place or area, and a typical page usually outlines a general description and everything going on in the level, what or if there are any living entities in the level, what or if there are any groups that are in the level, and finally, how you enter and exit the level, with any other extra information thrown in to make it more interesting. This format is at least pretty common in fandom. Again, I can't speak for Wikidot. Usually, though, like I said, there's a lot more sections focused on unique or odd events and properties of the level, or if there's something specific to the level that's not seen anywhere else in the backrooms that feels important to mention. It's important to know, though, this format is more for newer writers, as it's actually semi-common to try to deviate from it to create a much more unique and interesting page. And on top of normal levels, there's also sub-levels and anomalous levels. Sub-levels are just level pages, but they build off the idea that they look similar to the page the level is based on, and have a slightly different number. And anomalous levels are unique and odd spaces that fall outside of the normal qualification of levels. It's kind of complicated to explain. They just aren't normal in a way. Next are entity pages, which describe a living creature that is from the backrooms itself. Entity pages usually contain a visual description, a description of how the entity behaves or acts, a description of the general biology of the entity if applicable, and then how the entity was discovered, which would sort of act as an in canon or in lore reason or explanation as to why the page has been created. Just like levels as well, there's anomalous entities, which are usually more powerful or more odd than standard entities. One thing I want to make clear is that entity pages are more like describing a normal living creature rather than an SCP anomalous being, although those types of entity pages do exist. An entity page can range from describing things like viruses and parasites as those are living to backrooms ified versions of normal animals, again normal to sort of an extent, to just straight up humanoid like beings that exist in the backrooms that are as smart as humans. Next are object pages, which are more closer to your typical SCP type page, although most are basically just anomalous foods that have different unique properties. Sometimes, and they're usually tied into an entity page in some way, as they sometimes come from an entity. Object pages usually describe the object itself, then describe how it can be used, where the object can be found, and then how the object is made, and possibly if there are any different versions of the object. Then there's tales, which are written stories that take place in or around the backrooms as a concept, which can basically be focused around anything else and include anything you can possibly think of that are in or that are in the backrooms. And tales don't really have a detailed format, so I mean, not detailed, determined format. So you're encouraged to just be as creative as you want. Okay, so to try to keep this a little bit more brief, since there's a lot more, I'm just going to start listing off other stuff you can make as well. There's also group pages detailing groups of people or entities with varying levels of size, power, and detail. Persons of interest being pages focused on one specific person or entity. Phenomenon pages which detail how the backrooms works and or different things that happen or can happen across several levels in the backrooms. Then there's what are considered esoteric pages, which on Fandom are basically anything that doesn't really fit into any of the previous categories I mentioned. With just some that I can name being theory pages, battle or conflict pages, entire languages built from the ground up to be on the wiki, and even concept pages, which are pages about the ideas of reality, governments, and sometimes religion that are canon and native to the backrooms. And then, on top of all of that, there are canons, which are a collection of pages focused around one central theme, usually made by a certain person or group of writers that are allowed to essentially break away from the backrooms, but still have their story tied to it in some way, and also don't have to abide by what is essentially the site-wide lore, or canon. All in all, you can basically write about anything you want, just as long as you follow the rules. Uh, and I mean, that's kind of everything. I'm going to try an editing, so hopefully include some stuff that I think would fit the bill. Both want to show what I think would be stereotypical versions of those pages, and versions of those pages that try to go the extra mile. I will make sure to have all the links in the description for you to check them out. That's all I have for now, but in the future I may make a more detailed guide about writing specific types of pages, going over rules or guides, although primarily again for fandom. Or I may just start reading pages themselves, like Brugly, but more focused on just detailed readings rather than, I want to say, the TikTok editing he sometimes has. mostly because I've gotten comments in the past that people like listening to my voice. But that's all for now. Uh, Goodbye.